Hello, in this tutorial I will show you how to use the dynamic camera effector tool. We first have to add the tool by going to Tools, Evil D, then Dynamic Camera Effector tool. We get the game object here in our hierarchy. And when we have focus on the scene, we can add effectors right away. Let's first see what type of effectors there are. There's, and I'm pressing 1, the circle effector. 2 is the semicircle effector. 3 is a torus effector, 4 semi-torus, 5 is a box effector, and 6 is a multi-effector. Now I'll show you what the keybinds are for how to manipulate the effectors. You can select them by pressing left mouse button inside the effector region, but you cannot select other effectors while you have it selected. Only by clicking on the handle points you can select, like this. You deselect an effector by pressing A, but know that you deselect one stage, so you have to deselect twice to fully deselect the effector, like so. We can manipulate the effector by dragging the handles, like so. You can also move the entire effector by pressing C, and then just drag around and you move the entire effector. Pressing C again will cancel, and you confirm movement by pressing left mouse click. Now there are some special effectors like the torus effector. We have a handle here, but we also have the outer radius we can change by clicking it. Another special effector is the box effector. It has more handles than the other, but as you can see it's mirrored on the other side. And we also have the multi-effector. It's pretty similar, but now we can add points to it. But we cannot add points once we have a handle selected. You must deselect the handle first, and you press A, and you add points by just clicking on the screen, and they get wherever you want them. You can fully deselect the dynamic camera effector tool by pressing D, and Ctrl Z will undo the selection again. There's also a special regional boundary for effectors. If you press use shaped region, we get a square here inside. We can move this around by pressing V and V again to cancel, similar to moving the effector around by C. That's what I'm doing now, but this will only move the red square individually. Now we get back to this later. And you can delete effectors by pressing B. And Ctrl Z will undo the delete again. So I can press B to delete, B, B, B. Alright. I have loaded the demo scene. It's called slow scene. I'm going to add an effector that keeps the camera outside of a region, outside of a room transition, for example. So let's make one right here. We can do this by creating a box effector. Let's select the tool first. Alright, by pressing 5 we created a box effector. And we can manipulate the points so that it overlaps the room. And once it's a good size, we can also copy it to the other node. So the red one is always node 1, so this copies the distance. Now we want to move the camera to the boundaries of the box effector so that the camera stays aside when the player is inside. So let's first ramp up the feather amount. What this does is it will have a region that is always have influence of 1, that's inside here, and between the boundary and the feather amount it's interpolated from 0 to 1, which I can show you once we add some strength. Let's add 1 on both nodes. And I press show influence. When I hover over here, we see influence of 0, 0.1-ish. And we increase it once we go up, up, and it's 1 inside this area. Now, as you can see, the arrow represents the displacement of the camera. So if you make the strength higher, you will see that it displaces towards the center line. Let's turn on show influence. So as you can see, it displaces towards the center line of the box effector. Another nice thing of the box effector is you can have all sorts of strength effects. If we set this to 0, for example, node 2, you get a interpolated strength over along the center line as well. Back to 5 again. We want to have it we want to have the camera pushed to the outside, so now our effector is attracting it to the center line. So let's select repel, and it goes to the boundary. So we can just ramp up the strength now to get it all the way towards the boundary, and have feather amount to 1. So it is always pushed to the boundary. However, there's an easier trick. You can say distance equals strength. That means it will always push to the boundary, no matter where you are inside the effector. You can also preview how it looks. Now our mouse cursor is the camera. And once we get inside the effector, you will see the camera stays at the boundary. And once we go over the center line, it flips to the other side. Also note that this transition is not smooth. That's because in the editor it is instantaneous. We can press play and see how it looks. As you can see, it smooths the transition and it stays outside the transition as well. That's pretty nice. You can also toy around with the depth strength. For example, minus negative depth strength zooms the camera out. As you can see also in the preview. That's pretty nice. Next I want to show you how to make a focus type effector. What I want to have is that once the player is inside this room, the purple hat, I want to have the camera go towards the center of the room and have this head, the purple head, and this one both in one frame. We can do this by adding a semicircle effector, and we shape it around, roughly around the area we want to have it affected. So let's use distance is equal to strength again, so we can displace it towards the center, but feather amount is set 0, so let's increase that to 1. So we get displaced towards the center now. However, we get also displaced at regions where we do not want to have the camera displaced. We can solve this by using the shaped region, and we can drag this with V and place it here. What this does is once you enter the shaded region, that is the region where also the effector will be active. So we can drag the points, the red points, to outline the room we want to have get affected. And there we go. We can use a preview camera. And let's say depth strength is equal to -15. That catches the both heads in one frame. But also notice that the displacement is instantaneously in the editor. The displacement gets smoothed out during playtime. So let's play it and let's see what it does. Alright, we're getting towards it and we get the zoom out and focus effect all in one. And it gets smoothed out from the camera tracker, so we can increase smooth time and we see it gets slowed down. The shaped region can also be used for more complex rooms. We can insert a point when we hover over the edge of the shaped region and left click. This gives us more points and we can just add them to create a more complex room shape. Let's see. This allows you to create effectors inside complex rooms where you just want to have it only active in certain regions. Alright, that's it. I forgot to mention something about the multi-effector. We can add some points again by just clicking around. We can make it a loop by pressing use as loop. And once you select a handle of the multi-effector, you see two more handles. The blue one is for the outward distance, and the yellow one is for the pivot of this semi-torus. They're both interconnected, so the maximum distance is not determined by placing the blue one, but it's also determined by the pivot point, so in this case we cannot increase the size. That's because there won't be a solution if you increase it further. We can make all sort of shapes with it. Also note that the semi-toruses are linearly interpolated, so you can have a kind of funnel shape, as you can see over here. You can also insert points by just hovering over the edges of the path you have created. This is also only possible when you deselect the handle first. And you can delete points you've added by pressing right mouse button on them. Another interesting about the multi-effector is that we can set the strengths per node. This means if you set this to, let's say, 3 strengths and increase the feather a bit, you can see it's linear interpolates between these two nodes. Let's see if it also happens when we have a midsection. So it interpolates approximately from the bisector towards the other bisector. As you can see, it's decreasing up until the bisector. This allows for all sort of effects and makes the multi-effector most versatile effector there is. Next I'm going to show you how to create a real effector. I want to have it go down this shaft and go up the purple ramp until the end. We can do this by adding a real effector. We can do this by adding a multi-effector. Press 6 to add one. We can shape it into the shaft like this, and to add points we have to deselect the handle first and then just click on the position where you want to have them. Ctrl Z to delete points, and we can just drag the handles around and shape them. So let's make them a good size. Alright, this is the shape I'm happy with. Let's increase the feather amount and let's set distance equal to strength again. It's a really useful function. And as you can see, we are always displaced towards the center line of the multi-effector. You can also see that in the preview camera, that it's just going smooth down. You can also add a zoom effect. For example, let's zoom out a bit by setting strength to -5, and then we make all nodes same strength. I can see we got zoomed out. What you also can do is, instead of having the center line as a rail, you can also have the boundary function as real. You can use repel, and then it will stick towards the boundary, but now it will still flip. We can change this by copying the strength to all again and select unilateral displacement. And what this does is it will have one direction over the entire effector. So as you can see, crossing the center line will still result in the same directional displacement. So you can create some sort of real effector as well for this. Maybe increase strength a bit. And pressing repel again flips the direction.